Hello, I'm Kelly Doyle Bailey, and I'm a social emotional learning specialist for the Maine Department of Education. And this is the fourth in a 5-week series on SEL. And today we're going to be discussing relationships and how important relationships are and connections we make with ourselves, also with our colleagues, families, and our students. If you've been following this series, you know that we are really investing some time and energy into building our own emotional intelligence, beginning with self-awareness, moving into self-management. The other day, we talked about social awareness and how important that is with regard to empathy and compassion for ourselves, but also for humanity at large. And today we're going to be talking about the fourth competency of relationships. So I will screen share and get our PowerPoint going. Okay, SEL for Maine educators with regard to relationships. So this is the fourth competency in building our emotional intelligence, and it centers solely around the relationships that we have with ourselves, well, the relationship that we have with ourselves, and how our thoughts, behaviors, context about our own selves often shape and manifest our relationships with other human beings. So relationships can be defined as a state of being connected, and that's why mindfulness is so important. Mindfulness helps us to stay present, helps us calm our central nervous system, helps us to alleviate the looping and the perseverative things that the mind will do. Remember that the mind will wander 47% of the time that we're awake. We'll be engaged in a memory, having a thought, or making a plan. And while some of those thoughts, memories, and plans might be beneficial to us, some of those things could be triggering old patterns or old events of suffering. And so whenever we're vacillating in our thoughts and memories and plans, so is the neurochemistry of our body. And that will either support our right connection with ourselves and other humans, or it will divide that. CASEL is, again, the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning, and they define relationships, healthy relationship skills, as being contingent upon the human capacity to establish and maintain healthy and rewarding connections with diverse individuals and groups of people. And I would add, having a healthy connection with yourself. And I say that this really does begin with ourselves. How many of us truly like who we are, or even love ourselves, and would to be brave and bold enough to say that I love who I am, and I love my journey, and I love my thoughts and feelings about myself and other people. So that's where we'll begin. The foundation of our own personal growth and evolution really begins with our own ability to be attuned to ourselves. And so I know that a lot of people, and myself in the past, would maybe roll my eyes or think, that is kooky stuff and I don't have time for this self-love sort of thing. But when we are connected and in congruence, remember, when the heart and the mind and the brain and the body are all integrated in a connected, congruent way, then we are experiencing self-love. We have a connection. When we are in that safe space, it allows us to be more tolerant of life's frustrations and to create closer connections, to be gentle and kind with yourselves. You've heard people say, be gentle, you're still learning. We say this to our students all the time, but how much time do we invest in really building that capacity within ourselves? So it is said that self-love is the most important factor in a healthy, purposeful, and fulfilling life. Remember that our purpose on the planet Earth is not to be constantly just in that survival mode, running in that place of automaticity, moving from one event to the next event, and saying to ourselves, always striving for something, right? We're really meant to thrive and to be content where we are, and to notice when we're in chaos and and maybe recognize whether the chaos is good for us or not. So taking those still small moments to just simply be present with ourselves, with our breath. And so this, before we get too much farther in our learning, it's really important for me to pause right now and to just give ourselves time to connect with this learning and with this thinking, because for some of us, this may be the section of emotional development and emotional intelligence that we don't spend a lot of time with because we don't think it's important. So my invitation for you is to just sit for a moment, and I'm going to walk us through some of the practices that we've been through over the last three modules for emotional intelligence. And first, we'll just start with feeling grounded. So allow your feet to anchor yourself in your space, and just notice your body being held and supported by your chair or wherever you're sitting, wherever you've chosen to sit. If you're lying down, that's okay. Just really feeling your body anchored and connected. And just for a moment, tapping into that grounded, centered place by thinking about on purpose and allowing our sensory system to give us information. So notice what you hear. We're listening on purpose. Notice what you see. If your eyes are closed, maybe you're seeing images or light, shapes, movement. Notice what you feel, your tactile sense. Maybe your arms resting on the chair and you feel the connection, the contact of your skin, or your clothing on your skin, or jewelry. Maybe you notice small discomforts or even big pain. And just leaning in and noticing and telling yourself, I feel this, I sense you. Thank you for giving me a notice of need. Notice what you smell. And lastly, in the grounded practice, we're invited to notice what we taste. If you have coffee beside you, or water, or if you're having a snack, mindfully drink or mindfully eat. Notice how the flavors tell you something. Next, we'll move into breathing on purpose, or mindful breathing, or focused breath. Breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. And while we do that, noticing the rise and fall of our stomach and our chest. You may be noticing that your mind is wandering right now, and that's okay. We can implement the practice of RAIN, recognize, acknowledge, investigate, and allow, and have non-attachment. What is coming up for you in this moment? Can you give yourself permission to let the thoughts or memories of plans just surface? Take note of them without trying to talk to them. Just simply let them move past like a cloud in the sky. In through the nose, I am present. Out through the mouth, I am calm. And next, for the next 30 seconds or so, and you don't need to busy your mind with keeping the time, I'll do that for us. Practice anchoring And if you haven't um, learned that practice yet, and if you've skipped ahead and that's okay, anchoring is simply noticing each time your memory or thought or plan pops up in your mind during this breathing for 30 seconds and telling yourself breath or here or present. Next, we'll shift into just a simple body scan where you're bringing your attention and focus to the tips of your toes, wiggle them, move from your toes to your ankles, maybe flexing the feet, ankles to knees, maybe pumping the calves, knees to hips, noticing the thigh muscle, the big quad muscle, and just giving a small nod of gratitude for the work that the legs do for us without our even having to tell them to. Moving to your core or your stomach, straightening the back, just noticing for a second what the belly is telling you. Is it happy and content? Has it had enough to eat today? Or is the belly feeling out of sorts, hungry? What signals is the belly giving you? Moving from the belly or the gut to the heart center and resting your hand on your heart and noticing just the unique rhythm of the beating of your own heart and a small nod of gratitude for being alive today and telling yourself, thank you, heart, for beating inside my chest. Thank you for keeping me alive even when I'm not aware of the work you do. Thank you for working with all other systems of the body. Moving from the heart center to the shoulders, relaxing the shoulders, letting the arms grow heavy. The body is becoming increasingly more relaxed as you give just a bit of self-love to relaxation, time out, stopping the busyness just for a second to let the heart beat, the breath become regulated. Notice your neck. Allow your jaw to soften and space to be between your top teeth and your bottom teeth. Notice your face muscles, your cheeks. Relax and soften the eyes. Notice your forehead and your eyebrows. Soften anywhere along from the top of your head to the tips of your toes that might be holding on to stress. And like we practiced last time, hold space for yourself. Moving from the top of your head to the tips of your toes and back again to your heart center. The loving kindness practice that we practiced when we worked in social awareness ultimately begins with excuse me, kindness for ourselves and love. And so we say to ourselves, may I be well, may I be safe, may I be healthy and happy in this still small moment I've carved out for myself. May I be free of all pain and suffering right this moment. And may my heart be filled with joy and empathy and compassion and care, understanding and forgiveness. May I know I am enough, I'm doing enough, and I'm still learning. Just breathing that loving kindness for yourself in through your nose and out through your mouth. Again, in through your nose and out through your mouth. And one more time, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Begin to bring yourself back to this physical space if you were able to get to that place of calm and care just for a few moments of self-love. Remember that we're all still learning to slow down and to be present in our life and to take care of ourselves. Mindful practices are truly about being purposeful about how we choose to live. Are we living in an urgent state of chaos and one thing to the next, striving, striving, striving? Or are we thriving in the knowledge that in this moment, I'm okay and I'm enough? So what is self-love and how do we achieve it? This is an amazing YouTube video that I would love to share. It's a TED Talk actually about self-love and being intentional. Okay, so I've watched that a couple times now. Excuse me. And what she said was that really resonated with myself is, do I have a craving to really know myself more deeply? And I don't know, in my path, aside from when I began to really get quiet and contemplate truly who I am from the inside out, not the outside and in, did I really get that? And I think I was in my late 40s before I really started to understand that I have value in the inside of what I am. And remember that we all come from places and stages and seasons in our life where we were either helped and nurtured or we weren't. And we had teachers who were present and gave freely of their hearts and their intellect. And we had teachers who were just going through the motions. We remember those teachers who touched our hearts and saw us, truly saw us, took the time to notice us, whether we had, holy jeans and sneakers that were dirty, or whether we had the best clothes. And those are the people that I remember, the people who truly knew themselves and had a deeper sense of understanding and could give that back to me. One of the most profound experiences that I ever had in my life was to go to Hurricane Island when I was getting more interested in becoming a mindfulness practitioner. And one of my certification requirements was to be alone with myself, to go on a solo or a retreat, a silent retreat. And so I went to Hurricane Island, and I was there with 20 something people, and we went into voluntary silence. And it was about a 3-day silent excursion with myself. And we were encouraged or invited not to read, not to journal, but just to simply be. And I thought to myself, I don't know how I'm going to get through that, or what that's going to be like, because I've never given myself the gift of being quiet on purpose, for the sole purpose of sitting with myself and getting to know myself. And it was actually quite terrifying. And I remember my husband saying to me, Kelly Bailey, you're going to get voted off that island. I'm going to have to come. It's going to be just like Survivor. They're going to snuff out your torch. How are you going to be quiet for 3 days? And I didn't have an answer because I didn't know myself. But after the first few hours of truly just being alone with myself, I started looking forward to the quiet. Things started surfacing for me, and I got to investigate it and be curious about it and sit with it and sit with pains, old pains that were there. Some of the pain that was right there at the surface, and some of the pain that I had just pushed and, way down deep. And I'm a different person today because of it. And we all have dreams, and we all have desires, and we all have hopes. And it's not what Caitlin said. It is not a selfish thing to get to know yourself. Because I think since we've been born, we get pushed along unless you have somebody that teaches you that skill set to love yourself and to value yourself and to know your self-worth, and never ever to be sitting in that self-critical space and place. So let's move forward. There are 10 foundational elements to intentionality of the self. And so what I'm going to say is we must be intentional in our relationship with ourselves. Our students and our own children are watching us. They're listening to us. They're learning important, critical things needed to be good human beings. What kinds of things do we say to ourselves in front of our children out loud about our bodies, about our capabilities? What kinds of lies do we tell ourselves inside our minds that we choose to believe, and maybe we don't even realize we're doing it because we've been doing it for so long? The first one goes back to the very first element of social emotional learning is self-awareness and self-honesty. This element is a very critical foundation to our emotional intelligence. It always circles back to the beginning. What is my awareness? What do I value? What are my standards? Not expectations, which are often based in fear. Thoughts of who we think we're supposed to be based on other people's opinions, the stories that we've created inside our minds, the lies we've told ourselves or lies we've chosen to believe we hear other people saying about us based on their perception. Standards are really knowing our self-worth. And this requires a willingness to be quiet and to get honest with ourselves and to look at the things that maybe we have categorized as shameful or ugly. And are they really, or are they just things that we think about ourselves based on what other people have chosen to tell us? The second one is self-acceptance. Self-acceptance requires a willingness, a deep, deep commitment to love yourself unconditionally, no matter what, even the aspects that we don't particularly like. And so there are, as you can see, I'll have to move myself over here a little bit. There are all these things and stages, self-reflection. These things happen in the conscious and subconscious levels of who we are. The authentic wholeness of who we are is really the more we accept ourselves as we are, the less we compare ourselves to other beings. Without self-acceptance, all the parts of ourselves, the physicality, the things we think about ourselves with regard to how smart we think we are, how beautiful we think we are, how capable, we are always comparing ourselves to other people. When we look at this from an emotional intelligence learning, then we just know that there are some gaps. Everyone has strengths. Everyone has areas of need. And they're just gaps. We all can't be perfect at everything, and we're not supposed to be. And accepting ourselves exactly how we are is something that we really need to work on. I think that this young woman said that we will get what we give. I don't know that she said it just like that, but what are we giving to ourselves? What do we say to ourselves when we look in the mirror? Do we say good morning to ourselves? We're really glad that you showed up today. Thanks for being courageous. Thanks for waking up. You get to do another day. Or do we say, oh, there you are. Look at the bags under your eyes, or whatever it is you're saying to yourself. So self-acceptance is a huge piece. It's a huge piece. Self-care, every teacher, every support staff, every person who works in schools will roll their eyes and chuckle when we talk about self-care, but it is not selfish to take the time and the energy to take care of ourselves. And this requires a commitment. Be mindfully aware that the heart, the body, the mind is a priority. We need to provide ourselves with the nourishment our bodies need, and we need to provide our souls the nourishment so that we can feel whole and energized, so that we can do the day that we get to do. Before we even get out of bed in the morning, we say to ourselves, I get to do this day, and give a big stretch and do a body scan and notice where there are aches and pains, and lovingly and kindly let your body know that you're grateful for the work that it did, and tell your body on purpose, I'm going to take care of you. And I'm going to stop and get a drink of water, and I'm not going to run on coffee all day, and I'm not going to, deny myself bathroom breaks. I'm not going to sit in the same place hunched over a computer all day long. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to read a good book. I'm going to get quiet. I'm going to practice self-acceptance. The fourth one is self-compassion and self-forgiveness. How many times do we hold ourselves to this standard that is just so high that nobody could ever achieve it? Excuse me, and never ever let ourselves off the hook for mistakes that we made in the past that will stop us from our best in the future. It's so tough for so many of us, myself included, allowing and inviting ourselves to have compassionate heart and an empathetic mind for my own life story and the paths that I've traveled. How many times I have played over and over and over situations and scenarios that I thought were damaging and wrong, when really they were just bumps in the road. We heard in the TED Talk that we get to control the mind and not the mind control us. And that's having a growth mindset. And it's more than just saying it, it's actually practicing it. So practicing self-forgiveness. I forgive myself. And that mistakes are not damning things. Mistakes are truly just opportunities for us to learn. That didn't work. We say this to our kids all the time. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes help us grow. Mistakes are good for us. If we sit in the mistake and we never learn from it and we keep making the same mistake over and over and over and over, then that's foolish and we need guidance. But when we make the mistake, let the mistake go. Don't let it define us. We are so much more than the sum of the mistakes that we've made, those mistakes that get to help shape our path, help us determine I can go this way instead of staying here. I always tell my own personal children, we are not trees. We are not stuck. We get to move. And you know what? Bending and trying to figure out is part of the path. So be compassionate, practice self-compassion, practice self-forgiveness, because when you do that, then you can look at those students walking through the door or those students who are going to look at you through the Zoom land in remote learning and have compassion for them. But without self-compassion and practicing self-forgiveness, and it's more than just saying it, you actually have to practice it. So when you see yourself or catch yourself being unkind and replaying old memories where you think that you were, in the wrong, forgive yourself. I'm still learning. I'm going to do better. I will do it differently next time. I get to. So practicing that. Trust for the self. In order to build a strong relationship with ourself, we really must be able to distinguish which self is doing the talking. So is it our critical self or is it our soul self? Is it the ego, which is really our pride and the shame, blame, and the hostility and the materialistic things and the power and all the separation and suffering? That's the voice we hear in our head? Or are we listening to the heart? Are we listening to humility and being humble and unity and forgiveness? And now being present, orientation, acceptance, tolerance, understanding, peacefulness. In order to have peace within your home, you first need to have peace within your heart. And if we're always up in our head and allow the ego to drive us, then the soul can't thrive and it can't show us a different way. And the only way you can get quiet with the self and to truly trust yourself is to let the ego be quiet. Let the head be quiet. And so we say, that's my head telling me something. If I feel separation or coldness or hostility, can I get quiet with it? Can I let it be inside my body? See where the resistance is sitting instead of just continuing to move through it, because then we just move through hard. We become bitter and angry. So it's about listening to the heartfelt sense of who we are rather than the head. Self-esteem. We want this for our students. We want this for our own children. We want this for our family, friends. We want them to feel a sense of confidence and show up for your life. Step forward with courage. Tackle an experience and say, I get to see how this is going to be. I wonder how this is going to work out. Or do we sense this from a place of fear? This is never going to work out. Remember, this all circles back to the self-awareness piece. To have self-awareness, to develop those self-awareness skills, we're truly, truly investing time in how am I feeling right in this moment, and where does this feeling live in my body, and then seeing whether we can do that differently without blame, but with curiosity and interest. Remember, mindfulness, mindful practices is about being present right here, right now, on purpose, just still small moments. Because in this moment, right this second, can we notice if we are okay? And not what's happening or what's going to happen or what did happen. Are we okay right this second? Because a lot of what we're worried about is stuff from our past or foreboding about the future. We can't build a healthy self-esteem and a healthy relationship with ourselves if we can't show up in our lives with curiosity and interest. Self-empowerment, this concept is the belief in ourselves to be more accomplished, to do more, to see more, to have big dreams, to fulfill our life vision. It requires having a dream and being bold enough to dream the dream, to have a belief in ourselves, to work hard, to have a little faith and a little courage to get out on the limb and experience the world and claim it for ourselves. And not being afraid and being held back through fear. Remember, every single time, and I feel like I'm beating a dead horse with this, but every single time we sit in mindful practice, we practice self-love, we practice a body scan, we notice when thoughts come up, we allow them to float like a cloud in the sky. Every time we do that, we change the neurochemistry of our body and our brain. We become regulated. And so remember, I do want to say this one thing. As we continue to go on in our mindful practice and become more regulated, you may notice, I certainly did, that it became increasingly more difficult, because if you are hardwired for fear, or if you have students and you're working in these areas with your students and you notice that it gets a little bit trickier before it gets better, it's because sometimes our body is addicted to the cortisol and the adrenaline rush and the norepinephrine that's keeping us in that hypervigilant place. And sometimes we don't feel right if we don't feel wrong. And every time we replace the neurochemistry of back brain protection with neurochemistry for congruence and okay, and we equal out the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system so there's harmony in our body, then our body will start feeling like it's okay. But oftentimes we stop the practice, and I know that I had a lot of start and stops with my work with mindfulness and becoming more self-empowered to fulfill my life dreams. I know that my body was addicted to the adrenaline rush of chaos. And so if you too feel that, and if you've had a childhood that lent itself to that, and there was strife in the family, or you moved a lot, or you didn't have a lot of stability, or you suffered with big adverse childhood experiences, if that was your life, know that you're hardwired for that, and that this might be tricky before it is a little bit more leveling for you. So just know that. So self-respect for ourself and honoring ourself, respect yourself to walk away from anything that no longer serves you or grows you or makes you happy. Caitlin talked about in her TED Talk, surrounding yourself with people who make you feel good about yourself and the work that you're doing in this world. Thinking about when you go into the teacher's room, and if there are people there that you enjoy being around, and you uplift one another and you problem solve, and you get curious about situations. Or do you go in and there are a group of people, the group of people that complain about everything and undermine everything and talk about the kid, oh, just wait till you get that one. I had his sister, I had his brother, just wait. Those are the people that you feel it. Your friends who are always dumping, family members. That toxic stuff, remember, mirror neurons. We take it on and we will bring that to other people too. So take a second. Who are the circle of friends? Who are the family members and friends? Doesn't mean we don't have to have love for them. But if they don't add value to the life that you want to live, then we need to have healthy boundaries for that. So self-respect for yourself, honor your standards, honor your values. Self-joy, plain and simple concept. Have more fun. Think about what you used to do when you were a kid. What hobby or activity brought you just sheer pleasure? What are the things that you want to experience, but you keep putting them off and you never do them? Self-care truly means doing things on purpose that give us joy and happiness, not waiting, not saying when this happens, then I'll be able to do yoga, or when this happens, after this situation resolves, I'll take up a musical instrument that I've always wanted to. When, my house is perfect, then I'll be able to paint, or, do what you want. We only get to do this once. Being present, have a bigger life picture. Having joy in our life is something that we get to have. We are obligated to be joyful for ourselves, because we're not supposed to be living a life that's always hitting a wall and not experiencing anything, just work and work and work and work. Jumping a hurdle, we've got to have balance, and that's what mindfulness does. Be mindful about what you like. And sometimes you have to get quiet with yourself so that express yourself, dare to speak your truth. It's the most important thing that we can do as a human being, is be beautifully ourselves. Because when we sit in self-acceptance and when we truly look at ourselves in a mirror and we say, hello, you, I love you, I see you, all of you, accept all of it, perfectly, beautifully, completely made. Not what other people think, not what other people have told us, and not the lies that we've told ourselves along the way. We're done with that old way. New way is being just so curious about your life. So how do we transfer this healthy relationship with ourselves to others? Excuse me. Having a strong, emotional, intelligent foundation allows us to build healthy relationships outside of ourselves. First, we begin with ourselves. We have to do that work. It's not automatic. It doesn't happen. In the TED Talk, you heard Caitlin say that we grow physically automatically. If there's nothing wrong with us that stunts the developmental sequence of our growth, then we grow and we become full grown in our physical stature. But our spiritual growth, our emotional growth, those things don't happen automatically. And so we have to invest that time and that energy by first finding out who we are with that self-acceptance and self-care, all of those 10 sequences, right? Investing that. And then we get to have connected, healthy relationships with other people. One of the ways that we do this is accept and celebrate our human differences. This is so important now more than ever. We must invest our time. Last module, I talked about social awareness. Our social awareness is about building compassion and empathy for ourselves, forgiveness and understanding, and then doing that with a diverse population of people. And knowing that we're all at the bottom, at the simplest level, humans on the earth, just doing the best that we know how to do. And remember that each of us perceives the world in our own way. And one of the major hurdles in cultivating strong, healthy, respectful relationships with others is when we put the burden of our own perceptions onto them. Again, taking things personally or having thoughts that aren't true. And this is always driven by fear. If we're always afraid, if we never lean into and get curious and want to get to know this person and this person and this person, not based on what we see, but based on what we feel. And not because this person said those people are not okay. It's about you being curious, about me being curious about you, and you being curious about me, and not having perceptions about who you think I am based on what you think I know or somebody else told you. And the only way that we can break those walls down and celebrate human differences is by accepting diversity and getting curious about it and celebrating the things that make us different and special and unique. But when we stay stuck in fear, conditioned by that, we will be held back every time, and we will not build a greater harmony on the planet Earth. We have to listen very effectively. Again, mindful listen. Listen, listen, listen. It's the single most important thing that we can do as human beings, is to listen. It is a gift, and it must be intentionally cultivated. It requires genuine, heartfelt interest and investment in other people. Caring what other people are saying, caring about what they feel, caring what they need and want, and responding rather than reacting. Pausing, listen, notice what comes up for you. If you notice resistance, I'm not saying put yourself in harm's way. I'm saying listen to your body, listen to your intuition, listen to what other people are saying, and ask yourself, am I ruled by fear because I'm afraid to get to know this person or this student? Just be curious about that. Active listening. Being present. It circles back to this every single time. Give time to people. Giving the gift of time is essential in forming meaningful connections and relationships with people. And we're often caught up with the busyness of our lives, right? Moving from one thing to the next with a sense of urgency. And when we do that, it really limits the amount of time we have for ourselves, the people we love, our colleagues, and our students. So practice being present on purpose. Be the person or with the people who notice what's going on. Notice what's happening. Because you know what? When we invest in that, then we are building strong connections, and this is the touchstone of our human experiences. Sitting with somebody without being busy, without your phone. Go to dinner and put the phone away, never looking at it. If you're watching TV with your spouse or with your partner, are you watching TV and feeling connected with that person, or are you watching TV and multitasking? Take time to be present in a very purposeful way. Watching nonverbal cues, watching verbal cues, listening on purpose, breathing, noticing what comes up for you. Develop your own interpersonal communication skills. Effective communication occurs when other people understand you, not just when you speak. This means not assuming understanding. Poor communication skills is one of the biggest roadblocks in building healthy relationships, and it can lead to stress and disconnection and erosion of all connection you might have. Think about the number of divorces because of not being able to effectively communicate and listen and allow your needs to really investigate your needs, and then to really notice what the other person needs too. We just kind of talked about this, but managing mobile technology. Most of us have mobile phones. Most of our students have mobile phones. And sometimes we even have two. This is my personal, this is my work phone. They go off simultaneously all day long. There are messages right in here. I cannot keep up. Have to have a balance for this. And when you're with one another, they have to go away, because the signal that it sends to other people, especially the people you love and your students, is that I don't have time, or I'm not really paying attention. I'm here, but I'm not here. And so think about this when your students come on your Zoom classroom, or they're coming through the door. Are you busy on your computer? Are you checking your phone? Or are you standing at the door and telling those students, big and small, thanks for coming today? These students are going to need this more than ever. They need to be seen. So please, please, please manage your mobile technology. Pay attention on purpose to the prioritization that you give. And when you're in the presence of others, what big messages are being conveyed when we aren't interacting? I think this picture just speaks volumes. We see it with our students. Mindfully give and take feedback. This is very, very tough. When we cultivate loving kindness, we learn to provide and receive constructive feedback from other human beings. And when we work on our own self-worth, then feedback can be received through a different space and place of understanding. Whereas if we're not present and we don't investigate ourselves, then we will most likely respond or react actually to other people with defensiveness. And remember, defensiveness is a difference in the chemistry of how we react or respond. Fight, flight, freeze. If we feel like we're being trapped, if we feel like we're being backed into a corner, we are going to be defensive. So when we mindfully give and receive feedback, then we allow ourselves to experience, how does that feel? I just got some feedback here. I asked for it. So practice asking for feedback on purpose. Practice with people you trust and love. Tell them what you're doing. Tell them you're cultivating being able to receive feedback. Notice what kicks up for you and then investigate that. Allow it and then become non-attached to it. And so many of our relationships that we have with people are based on negative interactions that we've had in the past. And so we already project that the next time we meet that person and have another interaction with them is going to be negative again. And this is that vicious cycle of never being able to get back to a set point. So think about these students who are still learning, and think about our students who have hypervigilance and really poor communication skills and have not learned how to respond rather than react yet. They don't have that buffer and they get suspended, or they get they have detention, expelled even. Do they get to have a do-over when they come back to your class? Or is your perception of them, that kid's a bad egg, bad apple, and they always will be? Investigate how much judgment you put on yourselves, how much I put on myself, and how do I transfer that to others, especially those kids that are really triggering for us. Do we get to see them through the lens of compassion and care? Know that that's cortisol walking through the door, norepinephrine, adrenaline. Can we see the behavior as telling us something that they need and not just there to make our lives miserable? Can we learn from it? We have to watch their feedback, what they give us. Honestly, it's not personal and they're not showing up just to make our lives miserable. Their lives are miserable. And so can we see that, and can we take that perception of what it must be like to be in that person's shoes, or that mom who's doing the best that she can, or that dad, or those moms, whatever the family constellation is? What is your judgment? What is your implicit biases on that? What judgment do you hold yourself and within yourself? So that self-inquiry and investigation goes all the way back to our emotional intelligence of self-awareness and self-management. Learn to trust more. This is so tough. If you are not a trusting person and have not cultivated the skill of trust, first you have to learn to trust yourself, that you will be able to do and make good judgment. And just because that hasn't been something that has worked out for you in the past, if you cultivate that, you can do it differently. You say this to your students. We ask them and your own personal children to have growth mindset. We need to practice this too. This is part of our human growth. Recalling that we must first learn to trust ourselves before we can really trust others. Cultivating a healthy connection of trust is essential for the longevity of any relationship. What is your trust sense for your boss? What is your trust sense for your partner? What is your trust sense for yourself? Go into self-inquiry. It all circles back to empathy. When human beings cultivate empathy and understanding for humanity, we become equally connected. Equally connected. Empathy, remember, is a state of perceiving and relating to other people's feelings and needs without blame, without shame, without judgment. That's a big one. Maybe it's accepting people just as they are because they're doing the absolute best that they can. And that means that we have to go back to accepting ourselves in small moments just as we are, and having empathy for the self, nurturing myself, caring for myself, loving myself, forgiving myself, understanding myself, relating in beautiful ways to myself, and communicating beautiful thoughts to myself, not damaging self-criticism. Cultivating the healthy relationship with ourselves is not selfish. And it's laughable because why weren't we taught this? Some of us were taught this. Bless your hearts. If you weren't taught this, like I was not taught this, then we need to. Every relationship teaches us something, even the ones with ourselves, and no relationship is ever a waste of time. If it didn't bring us what we wanted, it taught us how to handle what we didn't want. You can sit with that for just a second. Maya Angelou says, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. How do you make other people feel? How do you want your students to remember you? That goes back to self-inquiry. Why did you become a teacher in the first place? Why did you choose a life of investment in small humans who become big humans in big bodies, but still need us to help cultivate loving kindness and empathy and forgiveness and understanding for themselves so they can give it to other people? If they're not getting it at home, it's our obligation to teach courageously. People will never forget how you made them feel. Can you remember how an educator made you feel? If you had a connection, a healthy, warm, safe connection. You can remember their names. I bet you can even remember the grade you were in or the grades. And just as much, I bet you can remember the grades and how old you were the first time a teacher dismissed you or made you feel less than. And all those other people in between who just couldn't be bothered or just going through the motions of teaching second grade or fifth grade or 12th grade. We don't remember them. How do you want to be remembered? How do I want to be remembered? Thinking those thoughts on purpose means you have to get quiet with yourself. Self-inquiry, self-acceptance, taking care of the self. Got a little ahead of myself in my slides. Great teachers focus not on compliance, but on connections and relationships. So here are a few strategies for developing positive relationships with students, and I'm sure that you have a ton. Whoops. Co-regulation. It's the key to positive human connection. A lot of occupational therapists talk about co-regulation and the need for it. Co-regulation is simply defined as warm and responsive interactions that provide supportive, caring, nurturing, modeling to children the need for understanding, expression, and modulations of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Way back to, we ask kids to self-manage before we help them self-assess. We ask them to socially manage before they are able to regulate. We were not brought into this world regulated. Think about the first thing that happens when you're a baby and you're born. When the baby is born, as soon as the vitals and the cord is cut and everything is checked out, the baby is tightly swaddled and given to the mama, or allowed to climb up the mama and connected. The heartbeat, the limbic system, the breath, nursing, or the bottle, feeling safe, feeling connected. That's what most, hopefully, humans felt in utero. But not all children experience that. And so remember that trauma that has occurred for a fetus in utero can hardwire hypervigilance, because we don't always know what the birth history or the developmental milestones that babies made or didn't make by the time they get to kindergarten, and then we see delays or we see disruptive behaviors, we're only left to perceive and assume. And oftentimes children struggle if they're not identified, right? And they can't get occupational therapy because it's not a standalone service in schools and has to piggyback on speech and language or resource room support. And if a child isn't already identified in child development services, then they struggle. They become a behavior kid. They become the kid that really triggers and pushes everyone's buttons. And then maybe, just maybe, by the time they're in first grade or the end of first grade into second grade, they get identified, they get a psych eval, they get a resource room eval, or they start with speech and language because it's the least restrictive, and they have social skills issues. And it all goes back to that this little tiny one never had an opportunity to regulate. So our job as educators is really to provide a co-regulation, a co-regulatory environment and a co-regulatory presence. So listen to this beautiful human talk about this a bit. Okay, So co-regulation for at-risk students is so important. The neuroscience really tells us that human beings develop their abilities for emotional self-regulation through connections with reliable adults. Safe caregivers. These are people who can soothe and model a process called co-regulation. Children who have not experienced the reliable, safe adult connections and presence will really have difficulty with this. They will have difficulty regulating their own emotions and impulses because they will be hypo or hyper vigilant. And often we are not equipped. We have not received trauma-informed training. We do not have systems or climates in school that support dysregulated students. And so rather than responding and noticing that the behavior is telling us something, it is a stressor for us. So the more we can get to understand how important co-regulation is, you're going to really see the dynamic changes and shifts in other children. In preschool, this looks like, preschool children are beginning to build their motor coordination, their language skills. They continue to have very strong, big emotions, and they outweigh the overall emergent skills. They really experience very rapid growth in the areas of the brain associated with self-regulation, the limbic system, and that makes them developmentally much more prepared to learn and use co-regulation skills and self-regulation skills. So co-regulation in preschool is essential and primary. It is the optimal time for caregivers to actively teach and coach and support the skills like identifying emotions and problem solving and perspective taking and calm down strategies. But we cannot assume that preschool kids know this. And I'm just here to say 30 years working in the preschool population, really birth to 20, but having a lot of experience in that preschool and seeing children who have language delays and motor delays and sensory integration delays and visual motor. When we start making big demands academically for students who don't even know what their fingers are supposed to do, but yet we expect them to hold on to a pencil or a marker or a crayon and begin to write their names, to be able to form lines, we're really jumping the gun. Also, it's really important to know that the neurodevelopment of the eyes is very different these days with our littles. They spend a lot of time looking at screens and their eyes are just going from left to right with very, very short visual scanning capabilities. And so this is why it's so important for them to be outside and climbing and being on jungle gyms and doing the gross motor and not so much the fine motor piece, the experiential learning, knowing that their hands have fingers and are not just globs at the end of their arms. So this is important. Spend more time on experiential learning and connection and playing inside and outside than truly the paper pencil and copying and all of the academics that we're looking at for kids. So co-regulation for preschool kids, it's about providing warmth and nurturing, anticipating needs, responding to cues quickly, speaking in a very calming and affectionate voice, providing structure and emotional comfort when our preschoolers are distressed or dysregulated, really modifying the environment to decrease demands of stress in toddlerhood, teaching rules, teaching expectations in loving, kind ways, labeling our emotions, taking deep breaths, implementing mindfulness, helping children do heart and home, modeling flip my lid, helping them understand, even as a preschool child, they can understand they have a thinking brain and a protecting brain. And when they're about to flip their lid, they can have tools like calm breath. They can help each other with that, modeling weight, teaching simple problem solving. For elementary students, what does co-regulation look like? All those things that we do with preschoolers, we're going to do those with elementary students too. During elementary school, children gain more control over their attention and their emotions and their behaviors. They have a growing ability to manage their impulses and delay gratification, and they become aware of co-regulation and they really, really depend on it. So ongoing co-regulation supported through elementary years is really, really important to crystallize the growth of sophisticated emotional development over time, and helps them lay the foundation for the demands of adolescence, when the brain is really, 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 really moving in many different ways. And skills for caregivers to teach and practice with children during the elementary years include all those same things as toddlers. And at the same time, we embed bigger behavioral expectations and social interactions, building empathy and compassion and care, and really, really, really spending time connecting and not assuming that kids are ready to learn. Spending more time helping them understand the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. What happens when we flip our lid and lose our cool? For elementary students, we continue to provide that warm, nurturing, supportive environment, assist in the problem solving. Bigger, higher, more complex behavioral, academic, and social demands are there. So slowing the roll just a little bit, modeling the conflict resolutions, using calm down strategies, calm down corners in your classroom, implementing mindfulness and yoga and relaxation. Give kids opportunity to just sit and breathe. Mindful coloring after lunch and recess. Having sensory neural pathways in your, sensory pathways, motor pathways in your schools. Teaching organization on purpose, not just noticing that some kids can organize and some can't. Organization is a skill that needs to be taught. And when children are disorganized, it's because they're dysregulated. So this is more important than ever, not to be judging the disorganization and saying, well, you should know this by now. Why aren't you as organized as so-and-so? Remembering not to see the behavior as something that's wrong with them. It's something they haven't learned yet. Providing clear structure and consequences in a calm, nurturing manner. What do adolescent students need? In adolescence, the brain and the architect of the brain once again undergoes a huge change or huge changes. It brings about both benefits and challenges for self-regulation. In the early to mid-adolescent time, the brain system and the process of emotions and seeking rewards are more developed than the cognitive reasoning controlling systems required for responsible decision-making and future planning. You may catch yourself thinking a lot with adolescents, what were you thinking? Why weren't you thinking? And it's because that part of the brain kind of is offline more. Hormones are changing. Teens will be drawn towards choices that are often short-term reward rather than long-term benefit. And they can be heavily, heavily convinced and swayed by emotions. They can be prone to very poor decision-making, resulting in very negative consequences for their lives or the lives of other people. We see this every day in the news, and we see it every day in our middle schools. We see it with the increase in mental health issues of our teens. More than ever, these youngsters require a loving connection. We need to be regulated, and we cannot assume that teens can regulate themselves. We need to be present and regulated and here for them. We need to cultivate healthy, positive relationships, caring connections. It's so critical during adolescence. And some adolescents can be triggers for us. And those tricky ones, we need to make them our favorite. We need to pick them out and say, I'm going to care more, not less. And I'm going to see the behaviors as knowing that there's lots of stuff going on in the body and the brain. And if that child never had those opportunities to be nurtured all the way through their childhood, and we don't know what their developmental sequence was or the trauma that they had, but we can tell something's just a little off. The brain is neuroplastic, and we can connect new neural pathways, and we can reshape if we care. And we can't afford not to care. So co-regulation for adolescents is the same, providing the warmth, responsive relationships, really, really having empathy for these kids and compassion, model, monitor, and coach a more sophisticated self-regulation skill across all different contexts, monitor and limit risk-taking behavior and talk about it, provide opportunities to make decisions and self-monitor the behavior in less risky situations. What do you think might happen if? Give time and space to calm down, allow teens to rest, help them become organized, help them become successful for task completion and not assume that they can just because they're 12 or 13 or 14. My husband likes to tell a story when he was a young science teacher, Mount View, and there were a few young men up there, big old farm boys. A couple of them even had facial hair. And I remember my husband only being maybe 22 out of the University of Maine. It was his very first teaching job. And I remember him saying, he said to this young boy, Wyatt, at a dance, "What are you thinking? Why did you do that?" Because he did something in the dance and had to go home. And the kid said, "I don't know, Mr. Bailey, I'm only 12. And I never forgot it, and neither did he. These kids are only 12, only 13. It doesn't make it, it's not an excuse for the behavior, but it helps us with the understanding that their hormones and their brain are developing in rates and stages that is just phenomenal. And they need us now more than ever. So I always feel like it takes a special person to teach middle school. And so if you're a middle school teacher out there, thank you. Thank you for your patience. Co-regulation for young adults. We're not done. As adolescents mature into young adults, the demands and complexity for life transitions is great. With increased responsibilities, there are new demands for self-regulation, making decisions and choices for their lives. We know that mental illness is high, suicide rates are high. We need to co-regulate, and we need to be there for these young kids, young mature students, helping them become responsible, goal-oriented, compassionate, and understanding human beings. Cultivating that from preschool all the way up is our job. Young adults require a really steady, calm presence of us. And that means we have to sort out our stuff and our feelings and the impact that that might have. What we say, we have to regulate. We have to think before we speak and think before we act to these young adults, because we will make big impacts one way or the other for them. So it's incredibly important. We continue to provide a warm, ongoing, supportive relationship. We regulate our classrooms, make sure that they're not chaotic. We provide comfort and empathy during times of strong emotions without judgment. We support long-term goal achievement, encourage effective planning, consequences and task completion, share some perspectives, coach, problem solve, help them become masterful in their decision making. And ultimately, we hold space for them and allow them to make their own decisions and experience their own lives. And we do that through a lens of equity and care without judgment. This has been a lot this week, beginning with relationships with ourselves. It shapes how we think about ourselves, shapes how we will think about other people. So take a little bit of time, digest this a bit, talk to people in your cohorts, talk about and really contemplate the relationships you have with yourself and how that is transferred to other people. Some resources for you. Certainly hope that this has been a good module for you. Thank you so much for spending time and for investing in your own emotional development and emotional intelligence. I wish you all a great day filled with peace and loving kindness for yourself and patience. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.